Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome on behalf of Diabetes Awareness and you. Uh, Today, we have a very interesting topic that is on grandma genes is your genes. Breaking family diabetes cycle with diabetes. To guide us through this, we honored to have with us Ms. Bhuvaneshwari Raghavan ma'am. She is a clinical dietitian and nutrigenomic counselor at Dr. Mohan's Diabetes Specialty Center. Ma'am, we are delighted to have you with us. Now over to you. Please start the session, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Suparna. Thank you so much. Before I start my session, I would like to tell you, see, this topic, when I was thinking, like, what should I speak on nutrigenomics? I was thinking, okay, all of us have, how should I say, like, we take our genes from our parents. My parents had taken the genes from their parents. So it is like, from my grandma, I have been taking my gene. So genes and genes both carry the same way of pronunciation. So it is the same, like, my grandma dresses. I take her dress. So I am taking her genes. So today I'm going to talk on that topic only. It is like your grandma genes is your gene. So what I'm going to speak regarding is I'm going to break the family diabetes cycle through the lifestyle. So what are we going to look into this? We are going to just have a next few 45 minutes on the same. So Panna, next slide. Okay. Have any one of you have wondered, like, we all tell the same diet. I wouldn't say same diet. Okay, fine. We are tailoring the diet according to the individual. But say, for most of our patients, we tell it is like carbohydrate should be 50 to 55 percentage or 40 to 45 percentage. But yet, an individual of A and B who carries the same carb percentage, same protein percentage, same fat percentage, but have a different sugar response. And similarly, even with the metformin dose that I'm taking, there are two individuals who has the same glycomet 500 BD twice daily, but one has a reduced HbA1c while the other doesn't have. The same thing, we all tell the same verdict, physical activity is compulsory. Of course, the amount, the amount that we are telling varies. For some, we tell 30 minutes, for some, we tell 45 minutes, but almost the same. Like, if a person who is working from 9 to 5 job is comfortable doing walking or swimming, so we tell them, like, do this activity for 30 to 45 minutes, but has a different weight loss. And the same calorie intake by two different people have different triglycerides. I give 1400 calories for a person, for a B person. And after 3 months, I find a different triglyceride, though it is the same calories. So it is almost the same complaints that I do, but have a different outcomes. So why are these happening? What is the one root cause that I'm missing with this? So this is where the need for GLC came in. So what is GLC? It is a genomic lifestyle counseling. So Panna, next slide. So genomic lifestyle counseling, in the sense, my diet counseling based on my genes. Like already I said you, my grandma genes is what I've acquired. It is not going to change. What I am changing overnight is or they say over a decade, it is the expression of the genes that I'm changing. It is like, there's a verdict that, we usually tell. Kids are not born bad. It is their upbringing makes them a good person or a bad person. Similarly, genes are something that we have already acquired. When we change the expression of gene, it can become a good gene or it can become a bad gene. So our lifestyle and our nutrition should be based on these genes only. And these are not magic prediction. So I go give my saliva sample and then I do a DNA testing and then come back and tell, oh, I won't get cancer for a lifetime. I won't get diabetes for a lifetime. So it is not a magic prediction, or it is not a disease diagnosis tool also, or it is not a replacement for a treatment. My HbA1c is high, so I'm going in for a gene counseling testing. Then I'll tell, my HbA1c will come under control. No, it is not a replacement of treatment. It is just the lifestyle and the nutrition that I have to follow henceforth based on what my genes tell me. So how my body is responding to the food, how my body is responding to the exercise, how my body is absorbing the nutrition. So based on my genes, I will be personalizing my lifestyle instead of giving a general diet advice or a general exercise advice. So I am basing one on an evidence based. My genes are these. So this is how I have to follow. So this is what is my advice based on. Next slide, Spanna. So what is the difference between a standard care and a nutrogenomics? So in a standard care, it is the diet plan, which is, of course, I am tailoring according to the person's intake. Like, the person might have 1600, which I want to change to 1400. It is the same percentage of carbohydrate protein ratio which the person has. But in nutrogenomics approach, I am tailoring the macronutrient ratio according to my carb sensitivity, according to my fat sensitivity gene, according to my protein sensitivity gene. Obviously, the medications are also based on the gene testing. Like say, it is not a trial and error protocol. It is my genes are these. So I am guided by my metabolic gene variant and I'm going to change my dosage accordingly. And that becomes a different topic as well. It is a pharmacogenomics. So we have so many omics. We have metabolomics, we have nutrogenomics, we have pharmacogenomics. So this is evidence-based, gene-based result that we are seeing. Next, exercise advice. So go for 45 minutes of walking. Go for 1 hour of walking. So it is a generic advice I'm giving it to the patient. But what I am tailoring in a nutrogenomic approach is based on the energy gene type. What exercise, when exercise, how much exercise, what timing of exercise. So all these are, I am based on my gene type that I'm doing it. Next is the supplementation. So in a standard setup, I have one multivitamin. Suppose say the patient tells I have pricking sensation in feet, I have a burning feet, automatically I'll go in for vitamin B supplements. But in nutrogenomics, based on the genes of the micronutrient sensitivity, whether my vitamin D sensitivity is high, vitamin B12 sensitivity is high. So based on that, I am doing a supplementation. So what happens when I'm doing it all personalized according to my genes? I have a very good outcome. I know this is what is the result that I'm going to get, and it's a predictable, optimized response that I get it with the nutrogenomic approach, which I don't get it to the standard approach basically. Suparna, next slide. So how do I integrate the genetic testing into my daily way of seeing it? First, metabolic health. Say, if I have a key gene variant, like say, for example, the for a diabetic gene, it is TCF7L2 or FTO or PPRG. These genes are variant. Then I know that I will be having the risk for type 1 or type 2 diabetes at the earlier stages. So accordingly, I will target my lifestyle. I'll have an early intervention. So I will progress the disorder a little later. If I'm going to see on a nutrient based in nutrition, say I am a pregnant woman or I'm a lactating woman, or a person who comes and tells you I'm always tired, my HP percentage is always low, then what I would do, I would go in for the methylation gene. Or a person comes and complains to you, I'm always tired, I'm taking a good amount of vitamin and minerals, then I'll see for the clog gene, I'll see for the FTO gene, I'll see for the PPRG gene. So these are the nutrient-based nutrient, which I'm identifying the genetic variants. I'm changing my nutrition accordingly. So I am guiding them for a personalized micronutrient screening, and I'm giving them precise supplementation needs based on the gene basically. Next is the food sensitivity and tolerance. So basically what happens with food sensitivity, like say if I'm a type 1 diabetic, I would want to know whether I need to go in for a gluten-free diet at the earlier stages or an anti-inflammatory diet, or say I am a person who's at a risk of getting cancer. Like I have a family members who has cancer. I want to know what diet I need to follow, whether I have any intolerances, or I have an IBS. I need to know whether I'm having intolerances. Then I will check my genetic testing. So my genetic testing will tell me what are the food intolerances, what are the allergies, how is my sensitivity which is there. So I do not go in for unnecessary dietary restriction, because I have seen dietitian who gives a standard gluten-free diet if the person is type 1 diabetic, irrespective if they have celiac disease or irrespective of Crohn's or anything. The moment they tell they have bloating, automatically they put them on a gluten-free diet. But in this, I would test the sensitivity and then I'll do it accordingly. Last is the exercise prescription. Like I already told you, instead of telling in a generic way of telling it, do 30 minutes exercise, do 45 minutes exercise. What I would do, what is the right time of doing it? What intensity should be done? What is the duration of the exercises? So I tailor it to the individual genetic response for a maximum metabolic benefit. So this way, I would be doing a genetic testing for all these. Next slide. So now we will be seeing the key gene which is responsible for my diabetes management. First, we have TCF7L2. I know these are all biochemical names. You need not keep it in mind. Just understand like what these genes will do to my body. So TCF7L2 full form is transcription factor 7 like 2. So what does this gene do? This is a key transcription factor in WNT beta catechin pathway. So what this gene does, it regulates the insulin secretion from the pancreatic beta cells. It also regulates the GLP-1 mediated incretin response. So what happens when I have a variant, like say this gene is of low sensitivity in my body? Automatically I will have impaired insulin secretion. So when I know that I'm a TCF7L2 variant, I start reducing my refined carbohydrates. I start prioritizing my fiber intake, my low GI foods. Then we have the second gene, which is called as PPARG, peroxisome proliferator activator receptor gamma gene. So this is also a key regulator in WNT adipocyte pathway. So what does this gene do? This is responsible for adipocyte differentiation, and it opposes the action of pro-inflammatory cytokines. That is TNF alpha pro-inflammatory cytokines. So when this gene, for your understanding, I'm telling you, like how I said, TCF7L2 is responsible for insulin secretion. PPARG is responsible for insulin uptake or insulin signaling. So when this PPARG gene is on a higher trend, like say there's no lower sensitivity, there's a higher sensitivity in my body. Automatically, whatever I eat, the glucose is being uptaken by the cell. There's a good insulin signaling happening. So if it is a downtrend, say it is a variant gene in my body, then it starts affecting my fat storage and the glucose metabolism. So at such a stage, what I would do, I would start modifying the diet. And if there is a variant in PPARG, the results say the Mediterranean diet shown to be a higher beneficial response. So I modify the diet accordingly. Then we have another gene called as FTO. The full form is fat, mass, and obesity associated gene. This gene is responsible for the appetite control in my body. So obviously, when my FTO is a variant, I will always feel hungry because this controls the appetite. When it is not signaling properly, when it is not working, like when the gene is a variant, automatically my hunger pang always increases. Automatically, I will start having obesity related other disorders. My weight increases. So what I would do, I would find a calorie restricted plus high protein, because high protein will give me satiety. Last, we have MTHFR, that is methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase gene. this itself is a bigger topic because methylation is responsible for so many things that's happening in our body. It is responsible for the atherogenesis, it's responsible for type 2 diabetes, it is responsible in hyperuricemia, vascular health. So when you find time, just scroll on telling like methylation. So this will give you so much of insight. So when I have a lower MTHFR genes, automatically my homocysteine levels starts increasing in my body. When my homocysteine level starts increasing in the body, automatically it worsens the insulin signaling and it also increases the insulin resistance. So to have a good MTHFR gene, first I need to have a good folate metabolism, for which I would increase my green leafy vegetable and B vitamins. So these are the key genes which is responsible in diabetes, because now today I'm taking diabetes. There are so many genes which are responsible for other factors that's happening, but today we are saying diabetes, so we are looking into these genes. So these genes, these 4 genes are termed as a key players in diabetes management. So our diet is based on these 4 key players. So what should I do? Next slide, Spanna. So first, it is no more like follow a healthy plate. Have half of your plate as vegetables, 25% as protein, 25% as carbohydrates. So it is no more the standard diets that we have to look into. We should start exploring a little bit more into detail, because diet can influence my gene expression, the epigenetic. I might be a very low carbohydrate sensitivity, but I can change the expression. How do I change it? By adding a good functional foods. So what is a functional foods? Which gives you a little bit of more results than what a normal traditional food will do. So these are called as phytochemicals, which I would be dealing in detail. Next, we have physical activity. So physical activity can offset my genetic risk. So for which I need to know what time is when I do the exercise is beneficial for me. When, if I do, it is beneficial for me. How much, if I do, it is beneficial for me. So this matters when this insights I will get when I'm doing a genetic testing. The third most important is the sleep. Often we diabetes educators don't ponder so much into it. But actually, sleep is the major culprit for young people to get diabetes. When I say young people, the age onset is less than 30 years. The sleep cycle depth and duration matters. Why? Sleep, if I have a variant gene, it automatically increases the cortisol levels in my body, and that worsens my insulin resistance. Then I have micronutrients. So what are the micronutrients? These are cofactors for enzyme that regulate gene expression. Like as an example, if I have a vitamin D low variant gene, means vitamin D absorption isn't happening because my gene doesn't support it. Automatically, my insulin secretion and insulin sensitivity is affected. Same, when I have a low magnesium gene in my body, my insulin resistance worsens. Again, when I have less chromium gene in my body, automatically it disrupts the insulin action and the glucose uptake in my body. So there are so many micronutrients which are responsible for our gene expression. Next, very important is circadian rhythm, the clock gene. All of us have an internal clock running inside us. To make you more understand, I should tell, if you have the habit of getting up at 5 o'clock because you have to go for work, you have to do your work, automatically, even on the day of leave, like Sunday also, automatically you will get up at 5 o'clock. So the clock gene, the BMAL, PER and CRY genes, these regulate the body's biological clock. So for example, I am having a late sleep. I already have type 2 diabetes. I am not getting sleep, or say wantedly I'm watching some movies and almost on weekly 5 days I'm sleeping late. I am going against my biological clock. or say a night shift person who is working in the night, he is working against the biological clock, because our biological clock is set for 9 to 5. So when we are working like that, automatically stress builds up in our body, and that itself leads to increased risk of diabetes. Then we have a very, very important one, that is inflammation. Listen to your body's inflammation. We are all increasing our inflammation in one or the other way. When I start having so much of junk, when I start having so much of trans fatty acids, knowing or unknowingly, I am increasing my pro-inflammatory cytokine, that is the TNF alpha in my body. So when my TNF alpha is increasing in my body, automatically the glucose uptake doesn't happen, because the the insulin signaling doesn't happen. And it leads to type 2 diabetes via insulin resistance. Again, these inflammatory might be one of the reason for the autoimmune disorder, that is the type 1 diabetes, which happens. So always we have to listen to our body's inflammation, and we have to change it accordingly. The last but not the least is the stress level. Again, the younger generation to get diabetes is because of the major stress. So what happens? Constantly my mind is like a pressure cooker. The first thing that happens is the disruption in the HPA, that is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. For your understanding, the common term is gut-brain axis. So when my gut-brain axis is disrupted, automatically when my gut is disrupted, that itself will create an IBS, and that's a different story. Automatically my brain will keep signaling that, I'm always hungry. My hunger pang hormone will always increase. And knowingly or unknowingly, I will start eating, and my glucose levels will start increasing. The other way that I can tell is stress hormone releases cortisol. Cortisol gives insulin resistance, and that way my blood glucose also increases. So it is no more a standard diet counseling, diet counseling, diabetes educators. We have to look into diet, physical activity, sleep, micronutrients, clock, the circadian rhythm, inflammation, and stress. And stress can be, type 2 diabetes itself is a metabolic stress that's happening. If you take an individual in type 2 diabetes, it's a metabolic stress, that can be an hormonal stress, that can be an oxidative stress. So we need to identify the root cause of what the individual is having. You cannot give a general advice telling you need to have vegetable before breakfast, vegetable before lunch, vegetable before dinner. See, if I'm traveling for a very long, like say, take my example itself. I travel daily for 2 hours to my work. So to such patients like me, I can't tell, prepare 3 type of vegetable, have vegetable before breakfast, lunch, dinner. So quickly what I can do to change his diet? You can tell him, sir, lunch anyway, you will cook 1 vegetable, you cook that in bigger quantities and take it. For breakfast, quickly take 2 teaspoons of psyllium husk, add it in water or add it in buttermilk and drink. So that gives him fiber. That reduces my postprandial spikes. So think a little out of the box is what my session is all about today. Not the standard way of telling. Next slide, Suparna. So there are so many functional foods that's been mentioned for diabetes. I had some 2 to 3 articles which has been pulled out by the recent ones. So one article by Nair, Anish and Murthy says there are so many functional foods in our regularly used food. Like say oats contain beta glucan, which improved my glycemic response. Legumes contain saponins, which reduced my post-meal glucose. Probiotics increased it improved my gut microbiome modulation, as a result of which my IBS didn't flare. My gut-brain axis was nice, so my blood glucose came under good control. My green tea contained ECCG, epicalactocatechins. So it has an antioxidant and insulin sensitizing effect. And cinnamon improved my insulin action. And turmeric, which contained curcumin, had an anti-inflammatory effects. We all know regarding the resistant starch, it improved my insulin sensitivity. So this author reviewed the growing evidence that functional foods can complement conventional diabetes treatment by targeting multiple metabolic pathways involved in diabetes progression. And also he says that it should be supplement. It is an adjunct to the OHAs and not as a separate entity. Like you don't tell the patient to stop the drug therapy and then take only the diet therapy. No, he says both should go hand in hand. There's one more article. Next slide, Suparna. So this phenolic compounds, beta-glucan, antioxidant, he also claimed that 5% reduction in serum cholesterol happened when I intook 60 grams of oatmeal or 40 grams of oat bran, basically, which contain 3 grams of beta-glucan. So a person who is traveling for a very longer distance, or say person doesn't have time to cook for themselves, quickly you can tell them, ma'am, what you can do is, whatever chapati or dal that you're preparing for breakfast, lunch or dinner, 1 part of this and 40 grams of oat bran. So you automatically get 3 grams of beta glucan. What is 40 grams? 2 tablespoons at the max, or 1.5 tablespoon. Or say quickly modify, like one meal you take it as oatmeal with vegetables with little bit of protein. Cut down your rice, cut down your chapatis. So oats is easy to cook also. So that way you can always modify the diet. Next slide, Spanna. So there was one more which claimed that we all know this, but it was recent. So I thought I will just include the therapeutic effect of fenugreek supplementation on type 2 diabetes, especially when you overnight soaked fenugreek gives you more beneficial. So what happens is, it improved the glycemic control, it improved my insulin resistance, a lipid profile, body weight, BMI, and in patients, it also increased the type 2 diabetes. And what does fenugreek contains? It contains 20 to 25% of soluble fiber, apart from the 45% of dietary fiber. And it has a fixed fatty acids, and it contains 2 to 5% of saponins. So saponins is something that I'll be discussing a little later. Next slide, please. So one more which said that natural flavonoids helped to improve the glycemic control. So what did flavonoids do? Flavonoids improved my fasting glucose, improved my insulin sensitivity, it reduced my inflammatory markers, it reduced my reduction in progression of complication. So where are flavonoids? See, flavonoids itself is a bigger one. So where all flavonoids are found? Anthocyanins, quercetin, catechins, flavonols, isoflavones. So berries, apples, onions, green teas, cocoa, citrus fruits, soy foods, these contain flavonoids. So these are a good bioactive components that you need to include on regular basis. Next slide, Spanna. So as I said, flavonoids are a subclass which contains flavonols, flavones, flavonols, flavonones, anthocyanidins, and isoflavones. So you have so many subclasses in this. So currently there's a longer research which is happening with flavonoids. You people can Google it and then you can check it and then come back to me again. Next slide, Suparna. So alkaloids. So what are alkaloids? These are derived from amino acids. These are glycosides. I'm going a little bit of biochemistry also. So it is categorized by hydrophobic trypenoid, or say steroidal aglycon. So what are these? These are bioactive nitrogen containing basic components. So from where do I derive alkaloids? It is derived from phenylalanine, tyrosine, tryptophan, ornithine, and lysine. So what are phenylalanine, tyrosine, tryptophan, and lysine? These are essential amino acids, out of which tyrosine is conditionally essential amino acid, except for ornithine, which is a non-essential amino acids. So example, I'm taking the example of fenugreek. So fenugreek contain trigonelline. What does this trigonelline do? It improves the insulin signaling pathway in the muscle. So which activates the insulin receptors and GLUT4. So you all know, as diabetes educator, GLUT4, what it does, it uptakes the glucose inside my muscle, increases the uptake of my glucose inside my muscle. So as a result of which, alkaloids also helps you in controlling of blood glucose. Next slide, Suparna. Then you have saponins. So these saponins are occurring in legume plants. So these are carbohydrate molecule attached to steroid, which also has an anti-cancer, hypocholesterolemic, and anti-diabetic properties. But one thing you should always remember is, if you take a saponin raw, like where is saponin found? I said you it is legumes. If you don't soak it over for 8 to 12 hours and you are taking raw legumes and you are cooking it raw, automatically it gives you bloating. So you cannot overload with saponins. So it's very important that you soak it, you wash it, you sprout it, and you cook it also to reduce the saponin contents. And saponins also have shown to reduce the blood glucose. So how does it do is, it increases the, I should say it rather activates the PPARG gamma enzyme basically. So as a result of which, it gives you a good insulin sensitivity and it helps in controlling your blood glucose. Next slide, Suparna. So overall, what am I looking for? Am I looking for a functional food? So each food, when I'm telling in the morning, should have a bioactive components like polyphenols or phytosterols or probiotics or omega-3 fatty acids. So either what you do, you give it as a primary food, like say oatmeal, I'm taking it as my breakfast, or you give it as a secondary food, you add it to a food vehicle. Let's say, for example, I am having a ABC juice in the morning with my breakfast, or you give it as a tertiary, that is a concentrated supplement form. But when you're giving it in the supplement form, you should know what is the mg that you're giving. That's very, very important. So always remember, it is no more 45, 25, 25. Think what can be the bioactive compound that I'm giving. So to summarize, what should I tell you? First, whenever I am telling food to my diet to my patients, I tell them to include at least 7 to 8 servings of different color vegetables in the diet. I tell them start having at least 2 to 3 cups of green tea so that you get 200 to 400 milligrams of ECCG. I tell them include turmeric with black pepper. I tell them have at least 50 grams of berries. It can be a gooseberry, it can be a blueberry, it can be a strawberry, because these are all low. I say you can give it for diabetes. So which gives you 150 to 200 milligrams of anthocyanins. Include 2 to 3 servings of legumes per day so that you get saponins. So think on the bioactive components and then start planning your diet accordingly. Next slide, Suparna. So this is a case study. Mr. X, of a 48-year-old businessman, he was recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 2 years ago, recently diagnosed. And he's on metformin 500 milligrams twice daily. HbA1c is 9.7%. Frequently postprandial spikes that I was seeing, and also sleeplessness. So what time he sleeps is, he sleeps at 2 o'clock in the morning. Because he does business, he gets up at 10 o'clock. So because of which, what happens is his fasting is always 235, postprandial is 279, triglyceride is 211. These are the current ones. And because he is sleeping late and getting up late, obviously whatever timing that he gets up, he will have a good fruit salad. When I say good fruit salad, it is half dragon fruit, 1 banana, it is 2 to 3 strawberry, and he has 1 big, I should say 150 grams of papaya. Along with it, he have 2 eggs or 3 eggs for the breakfast. So after which he doesn't feel hungry at all. He has tea or coffee if at all he is feeling hungry. And he has a larger meal at 5:30 to 6 because his hunger pang is too huge. Sometimes he goes in for 6 eggs and skips the rice, or he has a proper rice, sambar, dal, vegetable curd. So after which he, he doesn't feel sleepy. So when he is seeing a movie or seeing a mobile, scrolling mobile, if he's hungry, he'll have a banana late in the night. So he came to me with all these complaints. Obviously, we did a genetic testing, which I'm not going to get into the details. What is the bioactive compounds which I should immediately think to reduce my postprandial spikes? And is the evidence sufficient to recommend them along medications? So this was what we were thinking. If I was a standard dietitian, first thing I would tell him is, sir, don't skip breakfast. Have a standard breakfast, have a standard lunch, have a standard dinner. So this is your macronutrient that you need to concentrate. This will be my standard advice. So little bit thinking out of the box, what we thought. Next slide, Suparna. So we thought the bioactive components that I have to include. So what we did was, we kept the fruit salad as it is. We didn't change it because he doesn't want to change. So what we thought of berberine. We thought of cinnamon to be included, a little bit of cinnamon powder. We reduced the quantity of the fruits that he was taking. And then we told him to take a good amount of green tea in between the breakfast and lunch. So lunch, we had a protein supplement because he was not feeling hungry. Then early dinner, we gave him with a good macronutrient distribution. So what berberine does? Berberine increases my AMPK pathway, adenosine monocyte protein kinase pathway. So what happens? It gives me a better insulin sensitivity and it may affect the gut glucose handling. The glucose uptake was good. So evidence-based was moderate. And we consider that adjunct with the medications that he's taking. Again, cinnamon. It modestly improves the insulin sensitivity. We told him to sprinkle cinnamon powders on top of the fruit salad. So what we did was little bit, not more. So we reduced the high doses. Then we thought of giving him a ALA, that is alpha lipoic acid. So this, obviously the omega-3 fatty acids. So just half a teaspoon of flaxseed oil when he is taking for dinners. So that improved the insulin signaling, oxidative stress. Again, the green tea that he is taking in between, it helps him to reduce the glucose response or the glucose absorption, and it improved my insulin response. And as soon as he gets up in the morning, we told him, soak a little, like let's say half teaspoon of fenugreek in the night, and then nicely chew it and then take it. So it gives me soluble fiber. It slows my absorption of even the fructose. Next, we thought him of giving a good probiotics. Either it can be a supplements or it can be a curd-based components. So what all these will do? This will reduce my postprandial spikes. But more than this, we thought of something else also. Next slide, Suparna. The first thing that we thought was to increase his sleep. We told him, see sir, we gave him a good tyrosine, tryptophan and magnesium rich foods. Like say, we gave him a good amount of seeds in the evenings. And then we gave him a good whey protein in the evenings as a lunch. So what we said them was, so even if you're not feeling hungry, kindly don't watch the screen time. Cut your screen time 2 hours prior to your sleep. So this was the first priority. Diet was my second. Exercise was my third. But my first priority was to sit asleep. So we consulted with the clinician. We went in for a magnesium melatonin supplements. Magnesium glycinate we gave him 1500 mcg. So that fixed his sleep first. And it was a plant-based with no side effects. And after which I told him for dinner, select a low starch food. Nicely chew and then eat. And don't skip your lunch. This was my third priority. At least have a whey protein. Take half teaspoon of whey, 1 scoop of whey protein in 150 ml of water, shake it, have it. Even though you don't exercise, you can take it. Or if you don't want to go in for whey protein, shift your eggs in the afternoon along with a good amount of salad, but have a little bit. And in the night, we shifted to the brown rice instead of white rice and reduced the portion size. So these was the additional things we need to take care. So without fixing his sleep, not even triglyceride, not even sugars are going to come under control. Because as you all know, the sleep is very, very important. Because there is no sleep, there is increased flux of free fatty acids. The liver doesn't signal properly. The brain signals for insulin. The brain goes in for insulin resistance. Obviously, gluconeogenesis happens. So these three are a dangerous combination. Free fatty acid, insulin resistance, gluconeogenesis. All these three, what happens? Obviously, there's an increased fasting, increased triglycerides. So what I need to fix is the first sleep. Diet becomes my second priority. Exercise becomes my third priority. Then we slowly started telling, okay, get up a little earlier, sleep a little faster. So you, unless and until you fix the root cause, next everything is not going to set upon. So this is what I feel as a nutrigenomic counselor. So first and foremost is start seeing for the root cause. Don't go in for standardized way of telling it. That doesn't improve. So I hope I have not bored you. So always remember, one, genes load the gun. Your lifestyle is the one which pulls the trigger. So your DNA is something you have inherited, but you can change your expression of the genes, and sustainable lifestyle changes can always delay, prevent, or reverse the progression of type 2 diabetes. And prior for that, I need to have a good, smart carbohydrate choices, good fiber foods, include functional foods, regular physical activity, weight management, consistent monitoring. And last but not the least, reduce your stress. This summarizes of what I've been talking for so long. Kajal, Suparna, this comes with the conclusion of my talk today.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for sharing such a valuable insights and taking us through this important topic. I would like to mention that ma'am is an coming author for a few research papers and has a keen interest in research and innovation in the field of diabetes care. It was truly an enriching session. Thank you, ma'am, once again. Just give me a minute to if there is any question. Till now, there is no queries in our FB Live chat box. Thank you, ma'am. And I like to request all the audiences, if you have any queries to ma'am, please write in our chat box. We will reach to ma'am and let you know. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, whoever joined with us. Ma'am, we will connecting you in our future program. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Suparna. Thank you, Day, for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you.
Suparna, thank you.